the introduction, and I'm very glad to be here to present our study on human evacuation behavior involving individuals with disability in a building. And specifically, the evacuation behavior what we are studying here is the active choice behavior. And this is a study, joint study done by my graduate student, Nadash, myself, and Dr. Keith Christensen sitting here, and Muhammad Sharif, and also Dr. Anthony Chan. So pedestrian evacuation happen all the time, and it's getting more and more often, especially when the urbanized wave happening all over the world, especially in developing countries. So I just give two examples here. One is the earthquake in China in 2008, and the other one is 9/11 attack in New York City in 2001. So pedestrian evacuation is pretty important and has to be planned properly so that we can avoid really bad consequences. And exit door choice, we found that is one of the most important one in pedestrian evacuation. And there are many studies on this topic already. However, when we do literature review, we found that there's literally no research dealing with individuals with disability in this area, and which is surprising because there's a large portion of individuals with disability in the U.S. It's a certain over about over 12%, and so another gap we identify is majority of the evacuation pedestrian evacuation models use state preference data, so which means researchers ask the individuals about their choice instead of observe their actual choice, which makes sense because conducting real-world evacuation experiment is very expensive and difficult to do. So, but this research, we would like to take another approach. We want to use real preference data instead of state preference data, which means we will conduct an experiment to observe people's actual evacuation behavior during evacuation. So this is the significance of our study. So as just mentioned, we deal with individuals with disabilities specifically, and also we use review preference data instead of using state preference data. And again, I will reiterate some of the literature review on the pedestrian evacuation, but more specifically on the exit choice. Okay, so there are many studies on the exit choice already. However, we found no study focused on individual with disability and also heterogeneity in population, which means individual disability and non-disabled people. In the same study, we didn't find any study deal with that. So one of the motivation we do this study is to fill this research gap. And also we did literature review of all the studies we can find in literature. There are many factors people consider in their study when they model people's exit choice behavior. There are distance to exits. Okay, this column, distance to exits. There are density at exit. So this is density at exit. And then room information, this column, this row, actually this column. And then flow at exit. Okay. However, if you look at this two column, individual with disability and this is heterogeneity population, there's no study have deal with that. So that's why our study will actually consider those factors, but also we will fill this gap in this literature. So first I will talk about the experiment setting. So the the experiment was conducted at Utah State in the Ag Science Building first floor. We were able to do that in one summer when there's no student. We were able to close down the building and we also recruit about 50 participants and we can observe their evacuation behavior. So for this particular building, the ground floor consists of different rooms. Features the classroom, the computer lab, and also lecture hall. The reason we choose this one is because they have very diverse rooms. And we have four exits on the ground floor, door 1, 2, 3, 4. And when pedestrian was asked to exit the building, evacuate from the building at their maximum comfortable speed after they heard the alarm. So these are the four doors, and you can see they are all ADA compliant, and uh, uh, and we want to track, we want to know the actual, we want to observe the actual uh, uh, exit choice of individual with and without disabilities. So how do we do that? We choose to use RFID tags to do that because they are lightweight, first of all, and then second, they are relatively affordable, and also they can give us the information we want. So the RFID tag looks like something like this one, very similar to your conference tag, very lightweight. And in the building, we deployed the several RFID receivers. So here's the layout of the ground floor of the X-Science building. You can see we deploy 6 cameras, cover all the exits, and also 2 cameras in the building. And we have 4 RFID receivers so that we can track where people are at uh, at any time point. So we recruit around 47 participants, and among them, 13 of them are individuals with disability, and majority of them are blind people. And we conducted 16 scenarios. The 16 scenarios consist of different locations: classroom, computer lab, lecture hall, and a combination of all these 3 types of rooms. And then the number of participants of individual disability also varies from scenario to scenario. So to give you a flavor of the data we got, this is a snapshot of one of the RFID data we get. So you can look at this. The box here shows the individual ID. So we receive this RFID every 2 seconds. So this is one snapshot. You can see during this particular snapshot, we know exactly where all these individuals are, right? And if you want to track one individual, you can just imagine that we can look at multiple snapshots, and we should be able to figure out where they are, and then we can draw a trajectory to show where they go, right? So that's exactly what we did. Uh, uh, to just show you some of the RFID and trajectory, pedestrian trajectory we inferred from the RFID data. For example, let's look at this computer lab. So this individual start at this point, and then this guy choose the door 4 and then exit from this door. And this individual 27, I believe, this guy start from here, and then he or she choose to use this exit and then exit building. Okay, so this is trajectory data we were able to get from RFID data data, data set, and with this actual exit choice, we would like to calibrate a model so that we can predict people's exit choice during evacuation. Okay, so the modeling framework we choose to use is the discrete choice model. Basically, we give each option and a score called utility. And the utility function consists of 2 parts. One part is the deterministic part, that's the V here, and the other part is the stochastic part, epsilon here. So what we want to do is we want to calibrate a model. You can look at the utility function of each option. So the utility function consists of the summation of different factors. Okay. So the factors we consider here include, for example, distance to the exit, the density at the exit, and also the number of individuals at a certain exit, right? And the beta here will be the coefficient we want to calibrate. Okay, so how do we do that? We use maximum likelihood, and based on the actual choice we observed from the RFID, we were able to calibrate those betas. And then the ultimate goal is we want to have a model so that we can predict people's exit choice uh, during evacuation. So if we assume, okay, if you give a further assumption about the error term, if you recall the epsilon, right? If we assume the epsilon follow a Gumbel distribution, then we will have a closed form, a probability function, something look like this one. And since all the rooms in this experiment we deal with only have two exits, two doors. So the model we eventually use is called the binary logic model or binary choice model. And here are the utility functions we would like to calibrate. You can see we use three factors. D1, no, yeah, D1 here is the distance to the door, and uh, K here is the exit density, and N here is the number of individuals with disability at doors at different times. So the goal here is want to calibrate beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3, and then after we do this calibration, we will be able to have this probability function, and then using this probability function, we will be able to predict the percentage of probability of people choosing each exit. Okay, so that's the goal of our discrete choice modeling, and we developed the two models, one for the individual without disability, one for individual with disability. Okay, there's two separate models, and for the model for individual without disability, we found that the distance, exit density, and number of individual doors, the coefficient are all negative. Okay, so these numbers are all negative, and we have relatively good p-values, and however, the value for the exit density is a little low. We decided to keep that because the we have very relatively small data set, only 300 observations. So we decided to keep that variable in our final model. So how do we know our model is valid? We use 90% of the observation for model calibration. We leave 10% for validation purposes. Okay. So basically, for the remaining 10%, we look at where they are initially, and we measure the distance to the exit. We also look at the exit density and also number of individual at the door. So we were able to successfully predict their exit choice, 100%. So we know that our model is valid. And we develop another model for individual with disability. And for this time, as you can see here, distance to the exit density are also negative. But interestingly, the number of individual of disability at door, this coefficient become positive. So similarly, how do we know the model is valid? We use 90% of data for calibration, 10% for validation. So let's compare these two models. One is individual without disability, and one is individual with disability. And then these two coefficients, okay, distance to exit and exit density, both models are negative, which is expected. Here, the negative sign means the longer distance to an exit, the lower utility or lower attractive of a certain exit is, right? So people don't want to travel longer to an exit. And exit density here is also negative, means the higher the density of one exit, then the lower the utility or lower attractiveness of one exit, which is understandable. And interestingly, if you look at these two results, okay, for number of individual at doors, for people without disability, we found that this is negative, which means for people without disability, they don't want to go to the exit with high number of individual with disability. But in contrary, for individual with disability, they actually would like to choose the exit that chosen by other individual with disability. So this is a very interesting phenomenon we found first time in literature. We didn't find any other literature mention about that. Okay, so I guess in summary of our research, here is we're trying to find the or have a model to describe people's exit choice for individual with disability and without disability. and we conducted an experiment, real-world evacuation experiment at Utah State, and we used discrete choice modeling framework to calibrate a utility function and the logic model. We were able to successfully predict people's exit choice. Okay, so that's the whole framework. So what is the policy implication we can get from this particular study? We found that individuals with disability have trust for other individuals with disability during evacuation. Okay, this is very interesting phenomenon we found. And also because majority of the individuals with disability in this particular study are blind people, we found that the building code, the current building code like ADA, AG, IBC, primarily focus on visual signs, but those are probably not very important for blind people. They can't see that. So the recommendation we have is really to provide some audible indicator for individual with visual disability. And also, assistance should be provided for individual with disability because you can see people with disability trust other people with disability when they do the evacuation. But how about if some people choose the wrong exit, then the other individual probably will follow this person, so it will be a huge there are bad consequences. So we suggest that assistance should be provided to individuals with disability so that they can exit properly. And that's pretty much what I have for today. And any question, I would like to comment on any question you have. Thank you. Oh, Ducky.
So you mentioned that most of the individuals with disabilities were visual impairment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Were they game users?
I think so. Yeah.
Some of them.
Some of them.
Okay. When evacuating,
Mhm.
were they looking independently, or because
Mhm.
blind individuals sometimes they
Default.
use another sighted person as a given guide, and they basically hang on to their elbow and they walk together, which is a perfectly fine
Mhm.
way to go to a small, you can go a short distance,
Mhm.
especially when they're not really familiar with the environment.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, depending upon what the interaction was, I guess, this could be interpreted in many different ways.
Can you say the name?
These individuals in the experiment, they weren't guided by sighted individuals. There was one participant who used a guide dog, and then there were two participants. They were a couple who were both visually impaired, and they basically assisted each other in the experiment. But otherwise, they were independent participants.
Are they instructed to do so?
To
Exit.
To
Exit
independently
independently?
exit
Yeah.
themselves?
No, we just, the only instruction they received was to exit at the maximum comfortable.
Oh yeah, that's right. We tell them to evacuate.
Yeah, so they weren't told to not use a guide or to use one.
Yeah.
We wanted to see what they would do.
Yeah. There's no specific instructions. Just it's
So
also
very few of them actually use another sighted person as a guide.
Yeah. Now, they may have been doing it, informally, like following a group. But
Were they all in the same room when they did the experiment?
no, you have them randomly distributed throughout the building.
It also depends on the scenario. Right? The different scenario,
And
different
in
rounds.
each scenario, I mean, half of the individuals with disabilities might have a visual impairment. Others would have a physical disability or.
When you're visually impaired, and you said that they were drawn to the axis that there were other people with disabilities, but
Mhm.
if they were blind, they would not be able to see other individuals with disabilities. So, again, it makes a difference for other disabilities, but for visual impairments, not quite sure that they were drawn to the given exit because they saw other
Yeah, in the qualitative, like the debriefing interviews we had, with some of the